The great chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with soft blue light, casting elongated shadows across the polished obsidian floor. Ambassador John Harper stood alone at the center of the vast semicircular hall, his tall figure dwarfed by the towering stands that housed representatives from over 300 sentient species. The air felt heavy with anticipation as John adjusted his formal diplomatic attire, a simple black suit adorned only with Earth's insignia, a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by most council members. Ambassador Harper. The mechanical translation system projected the voice of High Counselor Zexatrol, a Vespid whose compound eyes glittered with the reflected light of countless data screens. The Council has carefully reviewed humanity's petition for expanded territorial rights and technological permissions. After 12,000 standard cycles of your species' membership in our alliance, we find the request premature. John's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The translation device pinned to his lapel conveyed his words in the standard galactic dialect, but he spoke in English, a small gesture of cultural identity that the Council had long tolerated with mild amusement. High Counselor, with all due respect, Earth and its colonies have consistently exceeded production quotas for the past 26 cycles. Our engineers have developed improvements to the Nexus Station's life support systems that increased efficiency by 37%. Our agricultural scientists have revolutionized food production on New Harvest, feeding billions across 17 sectors. Dreth, the Meraxian delegate, leaned forward, his leathery face contorting into what passed for a smile in his species. And we have acknowledged these contributions human. Your kind has proven quite useful. But the Council's mandate is to ensure the stable development of all species. The technologies you seek permission to develop have historically led younger races to self-destruction. Younger races, John repeated the words bitter on his tongue. After 12 millennia of partnership, you still classify us as children. High Counselor Zexatrol's antennae twitched in what John had learned was an expression of mild concern. Not children, Ambassador. Simply developing. The limitations on human expansion and technological development are for your own protection. The Vespid spent 4,000 cycles under similar restrictions before being granted full council privileges. John's hand moved to his pocket fingers, brushing against the small crystal data drive he'd been carrying for days, waiting for this moment. The weight of what he was about to do pressed on him like the gravity of a gas giant. 117 years of human integration into galactic society, trade routes, established colonies, founded technologies, shared, all of it about to change. High Counselor, distinguished members of the Council, John said, his voice carrying with unexpected clarity. Humanity has for over a century faithfully adhered to the Treaty of Integration. We have contributed our labor, our innovation, and our unique perspectives to this galactic community. In return, we have been systematically relegated to second-tier status. Our expansion limited, our technological advancement controlled. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as translation devices rendered his words into hundreds of different languages. John withdrew the crystal drive from his pocket and inserted it into the central console before him. A holographic display materialized above the platform, showing a formal document with Earth's seal. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded Zexatrol, the translator, unable to fully convey the alarmed buzz beneath the Vespid's words. "This is official notification of humanity's intention to withdraw from the Treaty of Integration, effective immediately." John said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "In accordance with Article 437, subsection 16, which permits voluntary withdrawal, following a 90-day notification period, I am hereby initiating what we call the Exodus Protocol. All human assets, personnel, and infrastructure will be removed from Council space within 30 standard days." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates rose from their seats, translation devices struggling to keep up with the cacophony of protests and exclamations. John stood immobile at the center of the storm, his expression betraying nothing of the turmoil within. Zexatrol's voice cut through the din. "This is preposterous. The infrastructure of dozens of worlds depends on human maintenance. The Nexus station itself requires your engineers. This exodus would cause incalculable disruption." "Perhaps," John replied, "that should have been considered before dismissing our petition for equal status. Humanity will honor its contractual obligations during the transition period, but no new commitments will be made. We have prepared for this contingency for many years, High Counselor. The exodus begins now." With a formal bow that managed to be both respectful and defiant, John Harper turned his back on the Galactic Council and walked steadily toward the exit, leaving stunned silence in his wake. Outside the chamber, Diane Lewis, John's assistant and the coordinator of the Exodus operation, waited with a tense expression. "It's done," John said quietly, as the massive doors sealed behind him. Diane's fingers flew over her communication device. "Initiating Phase 1. All human ships are receiving withdrawal orders now. The Nexus evacuation teams are already moving into position." John nodded, the weight of his decision settling fully on his shoulders. "And so it begins." As they walked briskly toward the human diplomatic compound, Diane briefed him on the immediate response. "We've already established a secure channel with Fleet Admiral Susan Miller. Human defensive forces are disengaging from joint patrols along Horizon's edge. Dr. Steve Patel's engineering teams are initiating handover protocols for critical systems, after installing the deadman switches, of course. And Karen Young's agricultural transition on schedule. New Harvest's human contingent will be the last to leave, but they've already begun sequestering specialized equipment and genetic material." John allowed himself a small, grim smile. "The Council thinks this is a negotiating tactic. They don't believe we're actually leaving." "They'll learn," Diane said, her voice hard with determination. "1 month from now, they'll understand exactly what they've lost." The human diplomatic compound was already in organized chaos when they arrived. Staff packed essential materials and destroyed sensitive documents. Communication officers maintained constant contact with Earth and its colonies, coordinating the massive logistical operation that was now in motion. In his private office, John activated a secure holographic communication link. The faces of his negotiation team materialized around him: Alan Beck, Earth's secondary ambassador; Greg Walsh, chief diplomatic strategist; and Frank Bennett, humanity's leading expert on galactic law. "It's done," John announced simply. Alan's weathered face showed concern. "Any immediate response?" "Shock, primarily," John replied. "They're still processing. By tomorrow they'll start making demands and threats." "And by the end of the week," Greg added, "they'll be begging for negotiations. The question is, how far do we push this?" Frank adjusted his glasses, a habit he maintained despite having perfect vision. "Legally, we're on solid ground. The withdrawal clause was included in the treaty. As a formality, they never imagined any species would actually invoke it. But there are no provisions for forcing us to stay. We push it all the way," John said firmly. "Complete withdrawal. No human remains in Council space after 30 days, unless the Council agrees to full renegotiation of our status, equal membership, unrestricted technological development, and expanded territorial rights." "That's asking for everything they just denied," Alan pointed out. John's expression remained resolute. "Yes, but they're about to discover the difference between denying something to a supplicant and to an equal who's walking away." The meeting continued late into the night, finalizing details of the massive undertaking that would reshape humanity's place in the galaxy, one way or another. The next morning, the withdrawal began in earnest. On Nexus, the massive space station that served as the primary trade hub for 12 sectors, human engineers initiated handover protocols for the life support waste processing and gravity generation systems they had maintained for decades. Chief Engineer Maria Velasquez supervised as her team systematically withdrew from their posts, leaving behind basic operating instructions for the Council's technical crews. "They've never had to maintain these systems themselves," she commented to her deputy, as they watched a Floxian engineer struggle with a diagnostic panel. Half of them don't even understand how our modifications work. That's the point, her deputy replied. By the time we're gone, they'll either meet our terms or be breathing recycled air that gets more stale by the day. On New Harvest, the agricultural world that produced food for over 6 billion beings across 17 sectors, Karen Young led the meticulous process of securing proprietary seed stocks and specialized farming equipment. The vast fields of genetically optimized crops would yield one final harvest before human agricultural experts departed. "We're leaving the base strains," Karen instructed her team. "Nothing that violates our contractual obligations, but the high-yield variants go with us." A junior agronomist looked out over the golden fields stretching to the horizon. "They'll starve without us, won't they?" Karen's expression was grim. "Not immediately. But within a cycle, food production will drop by 60%. They'll have to ration redistribute. The council worlds haven't known food shortages in thousands of years. They've forgotten what hunger feels like." Along the contested border region, known as Horizon's Edge Fleet Admiral, Susan Miller coordinated the withdrawal of human defense forces from joint patrols. The region had long been plagued by the Scourge, a coalition of pirate fleets that preyed on commerce between Council space and the unaligned worlds beyond. "Pull back to secondary positions," Susan ordered from the bridge of the EFS deterrent. "Maintain observation only. Do not engage unless directly attacked." Her second-in-command looked troubled. "Admiral, the Scourge will notice our withdrawal within days. They'll test the defenses." "I'm counting on it," Susan replied. The Council relied on human ships for nearly 40% of border security. Let them feel that absence. As human forces systematically disengaged across hundreds of worlds and installations, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. High Counselor Zexatrol presided over a chamber now filled with anxious delegates. "The humans cannot simply withdraw," declared the Tellurian representative, his crystalline form pulsating with agitation. "They are integrated into too many essential systems. Their action violates the spirit of cooperation that underlies the treaty," added the Proximan delegate. Dreth the Meraxian raised a leathery hand for attention. "I remind the Council that we have dealt with recalcitrant species before. Pressure can be applied. Their colonies depend on rare minerals from Vespid mining operations. Their trade routes require our navigational beacons." Zexatrol's compound eyes scanned the data flowing across multiple screens. "The situation is more complex than you suggest, Counselor Dreth. Initial reports indicate the humans have been preparing for this contingency for years. Their colonies have stockpiled critical resources. Alternative navigation systems have been developed. They are executing a carefully planned strategy, not making an impulsive gesture." "Then we must respond with equal preparation," Dreth insisted. "I move that we freeze all human assets within Council space and restrict their vessels from using primary transit corridors." Before a vote could be taken, an aide approached Zexatrol chittering urgently in the Vespid language. The High Counselor's antennae stiffened in alarm. "We have just received word that a Scourge raiding fleet has breached the defensive perimeter at Sector 7G. 3 commercial vessels have been seized, and a Council monitoring station has gone silent." Silence fell over the chamber. That sector was primarily defended by human patrols. The Tellurian representative observed his crystalline surface dimming slightly. "Indeed," Zexatrol confirmed. "And now it appears to be defended by no one." The emergency session extended into the night as reports of further Scourge incursions arrived. The pirates, quick to exploit any weakness, had detected the human withdrawal and were probing the suddenly vulnerable border regions. By the 3rd day of the Exodus, the Council summoned Ambassador Alan Beck, who had assumed responsibility for human diplomatic affairs, while John Harper coordinated the withdrawal. Beck stood before the Council with perfect composure, his silver hair and dignified bearing projecting calm authority despite the hostile atmosphere. "Ambassador Beck," Zexatrol began, "the Council demands an immediate cessation of this withdrawal. Your forces are abandoning critical defensive positions, endangering countless lives." High Counselor, Beck replied evenly. Human forces are simply returning to human space, as is our right under the treaty. We have provided the Council with complete timetables for our withdrawal to allow for appropriate adjustments. Adjustments, Dreth spat the word. You know perfectly well that we cannot replace your forces on such short notice. The Scourge has already attacked 6 commercial vessels and destroyed a monitoring station. Beck's expression remained impassive. That is unfortunate. Perhaps the Council should have considered the value of human defensive contributions before denying our petition for equal status. This is blackmail, Dreth snarled. This is consequence, Beck corrected. For over a century, humanity has been treated as a useful but junior partner in this alliance. We have decided that arrangement no longer serves our interests. And what of your contractual obligations? Demanded the Tellurian representative. The maintenance of Nexus Station, the agricultural production on New Harvest. All contracts are being fulfilled, Beck assured him. Our engineers are completing their scheduled maintenance cycles. Our agricultural experts are bringing in the current harvest. But no new contracts will be accepted, and as existing ones expire, our personnel will depart. Zexatrol leaned forward. Ambassador Beck, surely we can reach a compromise. Perhaps a phased implementation of some of your requests. I am not authorized to negotiate modifications to our withdrawal, Beck interrupted. Ambassador Harper has made our position clear: full renegotiation of humanity's status, or complete withdrawal within 30 days. If the Council wishes to discuss new terms, they may contact Ambassador Harper directly. With that, Beck bowed formally and departed, leaving the Council to contemplate the rapidly deteriorating situation. As the first week of the Exodus drew to a close, the consequences of the human withdrawal began to manifest across Council space. On Nexus Station, the environmental systems that had been optimized by human engineers for decades began to show signs of strain. The station's permanent population of over 3 million beings noticed a subtle decline in air quality, slightly erratic gravity fluctuations, and longer processing times for waste recycling. Station Administrator Kella Proximan, with decades of experience, faced increasingly angry complaints from residents and visitors. The humans left complete technical documentation, he explained to a delegation of merchants. Our engineers are working to implement their protocols. Working but failing, observed a Tellurian trader. My respiratory sensors detect a 12% increase in carbon dioxide levels since they departed. Kell could not deny it. The human engineers had developed countless modifications and improvements to the station's original systems over the years. The documentation they left was technically complete, but presupposed a level of expertise that few non-human engineers possessed. On New Harvest, the situation was equally concerning. The current crops were being harvested as promised, but no new planting had begun. The specialized equipment used for soil preparation sat idle, its operation understood only by the human agricultural experts, who had already departed for Earth's colonies. Regional Food Distribution Coordinator Vextal surveyed the empty fields with mounting anxiety. Without the next planting cycle, we face a critical shortfall within 60 days, she reported to the Council. The human crop variants yielded 3 harvests per standard cycle. None of our agricultural specialists can replicate their methods. Most alarming were the reports from Horizon's Edge. The Scourge, emboldened by the withdrawal of human patrols, had expanded their raids deeper into Council space. Commercial shipping suffered increasing losses, and several outlying settlements had been attacked. Fleet Commander Zorax, tasked with reorganizing defensive operations, sent increasingly desperate requests for reinforcements. The human ships constituted nearly 40% of our effective combat force in this region, his report stated. Without them, we cannot maintain the defensive perimeter. 10 days into the Exodus, the Council convened a second emergency session. The chamber, once a model of order and protocol, now hummed with tension and barely suppressed panic. High Counselor Zexatrol called the session to order. Esteemed members of the Council, we face an unprecedented crisis. The human withdrawal has affected critical systems across Council space far more severely than initially projected. Screens displayed real-time data from affected sectors, declining environmental metrics on Nexus agricultural production forecasts from New Harvest, and security alerts from Horizon's Edge. The numbers told a stark story of systems in decline and defenses in disarray. "We must compel the humans to halt this irresponsible action," Dreth insisted. "I propose immediate sanctions freeze all human assets within Council space, restrict their vessels from primary transit corridors, and if necessary blockade Earth itself." The Tellurian representative's crystalline form pulsed with disagreement. Such actions would only accelerate their withdrawal and possibly provoke military response. "We must acknowledge reality. We have become dependent on human contributions in ways we failed to recognize." "Dependency is precisely what the treaty was designed to prevent," Dreth countered. "No single species should hold such influence over Council operations." "Yet, here we are," Zexatrol observed dryly. "The question before us is not how we arrived at this predicament, but how we extract ourselves from it." After hours of heated debate, the Council reached a reluctant consensus. Direct negotiation with Ambassador Harper was unavoidable. A formal request for talks was dispatched to the Human Diplomatic Compound, where John had established his coordination center for the Exodus. John received the Council's message with grim satisfaction. "Right on schedule," he remarked to Diane as they reviewed the formal request. 10 days. I estimated 12. "They're feeling the pressure earlier than expected," Diane noted. "The Scourge incursions have accelerated the timeline." John nodded. "Have Alan arrange a preliminary meeting. I want to gauge their desperation before committing to full negotiations." The preliminary meeting took place in a neutral conference facility on Nexus Station. Alan Beck represented humanity, while the Council sent a 3-member delegation led by Under-Counselor Tapak, a Proximan, known for his diplomatic skills. "The Council recognizes that certain aspects of the treaty may warrant reconsideration," Tapak began cautiously. "Perhaps we could discuss limited expansions of human territorial rights as a starting point." Alan's response was polite, but firm. "Under-Counselor, let me be clear. Ambassador Harper will not enter negotiations for limited expansions or partial concessions. The entirety of humanity's status within galactic society must be renegotiated on the basis of full equality." Equality. Tapak's translucent skin rippled with what humans had learned to recognize as incredulity. "Your species has barely emerged from planetary confinement. Many Council races have guided galactic development for millennia. And yet," Alan observed, "those ancient races now find themselves unable to maintain their space stations, feed their populations, or defend their borders without human assistance. Chronological seniority seems a poor metric for determining status when measured against practical contribution." The meeting ended without agreement, but Alan's report to John confirmed what they had suspected. The Council was beginning to recognize the true extent of their dependency on human expertise and labor. As the Exodus entered its second week, conditions across Council space continued to deteriorate. On Nexus Station, the environmental system suffered a significant failure in Section 12, leading to the evacuation of nearly 10,000 residents. Emergency repair teams struggled to implement the human maintenance protocols, eventually stabilizing the situation, but failing to restore optimal function. On New Harvest, agricultural administrators faced the grim task of calculating food rationing schedules, as it became clear that production would fall dramatically without human expertise. The specialized soil preparation equipment, designed and maintained by human engineers, sat unused as local technicians failed to activate its more advanced functions. Most concerning were the increasingly bold Scourge attacks along Horizon's Edge. What had begun as opportunistic raids had evolved into coordinated assaults on Council outposts and commercial hubs. Intelligence reports suggested the pirates were exploiting detailed knowledge of patrol patterns and defensive capabilities, information they could only have obtained from the now absent human security forces. 2 weeks into the crisis, the Council was forced to acknowledge that their position was untenable. High Counselor Zexatrol personally contacted Ambassador Harper requesting formal negotiations. The Council is prepared to discuss substantial revisions to the treaty, Zexatrol's message stated. We recognize that human contributions to our alliance have perhaps been undervalued. John's response was diplomatic, but unyielding. The High Counselor's recognition is appreciated. Humanity is prepared to negotiate a new relationship with the Council, but not under the existing treaty framework. We will meet as equals, or not at all. After further exchanges, an agreement was reached. Formal negotiations would take place at Free Haven, a neutral trading post at the intersection of Council space, human territory, and the unaligned worlds. The human negotiation team would be led by John Harper, with Greg Walsh serving as chief strategist. The Council would send a delegation led by High Counselor Zexatrol himself, with Dreth and 3 other senior counselors in attendance. As preparations for the negotiations proceeded, John received troubling reports from Susan Miller at Horizon's Edge. The Scourge attacks are becoming more sophisticated, Susan reported via secure channel. They're using tactics that suggest professional military training. Either they've hired experienced mercenaries, or someone is providing them with strategic support. John frowned. You think a council member might be using the Scourge to pressure us? It's a possibility we can't ignore, Susan replied. The timing is suspicious and some of their maneuvers mirror council defensive protocols. Keep monitoring the situation, John instructed. If you find evidence of council involvement, it could significantly strengthen our position in the negotiations. The diplomatic team assembled aboard the EFS Emissary Earth's flagship diplomatic vessel for the journey to Free Haven. Besides John and Greg, the team included Frank Bennett, the legal expert, Dr. Steve Patel representing the engineering and technical divisions, Karen Young from Agricultural Sciences, and Lisa Rodriguez, Earth's foremost expert on colonial mapping and development. During the 3-day voyage, they refined their negotiation strategy, analyzing the latest reports from across former human positions in Council space. We're in a stronger position than anticipated, Greg observed during a planning session. Environmental systems on Nexus are operating at 62% efficiency and declining. New harvest production projections show a 40% shortfall for the next cycle. And Horizon's Edge is in chaos, 17 commercial vessels lost in the past week alone. The Council will be desperate to stop the bleeding, Frank added. But we need to be careful not to overplay our hand. Push too hard, and they might decide that military action is their only option. John nodded thoughtfully. They won't resort to force. The logistics don't favor them. Human worlds are too dispersed, and their military has relied on our ships and personnel for too long. But you're right about caution. We need them to accept our terms willingly, not under duress. This isn't about humiliating the Council. It's about establishing a new relationship based on mutual respect. And if they refuse? Karen asked quietly. John's expression hardened. Then we complete the exodus. Humanity will chart its own course in the galaxy, independent of Council oversight or support. Free Haven lived up to its name, a sprawling space station free from Council regulations, where traders, diplomats, and adventurers from across the galaxy mingled in relative harmony. Its central conference facility had hosted countless negotiations between rival factions, making it the perfect venue for the historic talks. The human delegation arrived first, establishing themselves in the diplomatic quarter and setting up secure communication links with Earth and key colonial outposts. 26 hours later, the Council delegation docked their ornate diplomatic vessel, dwarfing most of the station's regular traffic. The negotiations began the following morning in the Grand Chamber, a circular room with transparent walls, offering a spectacular view of the nearby nebula. The symbolism was lost on no one transparent walls, for transparent discussions with the beauty and danger of space visible to all participants. John Harper and High Counselor Zexatrol took their positions at opposite sides of the circular table, each flanked by their respective teams. The atmosphere was tense but formal, as initial pleasantries were exchanged. Ambassador Harper, Zexatrol, began his translator, rendering his chittering speech into smooth, accentless English. The Council appreciates your willingness to engage in these discussions. We believe that mutually beneficial solutions can be found to address humanity's concerns. High Counselor, John replied, humanity shares your desire for a positive outcome. However, I must emphasize that we are not here to modify the existing treaty. We seek an entirely new framework for human-council relations. Dreth, seated to Zexatrol's right, leaned forward aggressively. You speak as though the treaty has been dissolved. It has not. Your exodus is simply a violation of established agreements. Greg Walsh, John's strategic advisor, responded before John could. Counselor Dreth, the treaty explicitly provides for voluntary withdrawal in Article 437. Humanity has exercised that right in full compliance with the procedure outlined. The treaty will indeed be dissolved at the end of the 30-day notification period, which now stands at— He made a show of checking his datapad. 16 days. Technical compliance does not excuse practical irresponsibility, Dreth countered. Your withdrawal has endangered countless lives and disrupted essential services across multiple sectors. John's voice remained measured but firm. With respect, Counselor, that disruption reveals a fundamental flaw in the existing relationship. If the Council's stability depends so heavily on human contribution, yet humans are denied equal status and rights, the arrangement is inherently unsustainable. Zexatrol's compound eyes seemed to study John with new intensity. You make a compelling point, Ambassador. Perhaps we should focus on specific areas where adjustments to human status could be implemented. What followed was 3 days of intense negotiation as each aspect of the human-council relationship was dissected and debated. The Council delegation initially offered minor concessions, expanded, but still limited territorial rights, eased restrictions on certain technologies, and a more formalized advisory role for humans in Council deliberations. John and his team systematically rejected these half-measures, presenting instead their comprehensive vision: full voting membership in the Council, unrestricted technological development, with reasonable safety protocols applying equally to all species, and territorial expansion rights commensurate with human population growth and exploration capabilities. On the 4th day, as frustration mounted on both sides, Greg suggested a strategic approach. Let's stop talking about abstract rights and focus on practical value, he advised John during a private consultation. Have each of our specialists detail exactly what humans provide to Council operations and what would be lost in our absence. The next session took on a different tone, as Dr. Steve Patel methodically outlined the human engineering contributions to Nexus and dozens of other installations. The environmental systems on Nexus Station were originally designed to support 1 million residents. He explained, displaying technical schematics on the chamber's holographic projector. Human engineers redesigned the core processors and filtration systems to accommodate 3 million without any expansion of the physical infrastructure. Similar efficiency improvements have been implemented across 27 major Council facilities. Karen Young followed with a detailed presentation on agricultural innovations. Human genetic modifications to standard crop varieties have increased yields by an average of 212%, while reducing resource consumption by 37%. Without these modifications and the specialized equipment to implement them, New Harvest and similar agricultural worlds will revert to pre-human production levels, creating a critical food shortage affecting approximately 6 billion beings. Lisa Rodriguez presented maps showing the expansion of secure trade routes under human patrol protection. Before human integration, commercial traffic through the Horizon's Edge region suffered piracy losses, averaging 12% of total value. Under Joint Human Council security operations, that figure dropped to less than 2%. Current projections based on the past 2 weeks suggest a return to or exceeding of pre-human loss rates. As the technical presentations concluded, John addressed the Council delegation directly. High Counselor, distinguished counselors. This is not about human pride or ambition. It is about recognizing the reality of what humanity contributes to this alliance and establishing a relationship that reflects that contribution. We do not seek dominance or special privilege, only equality. Zexatrol conferred briefly with his team before responding. Your presentations have been illuminating, Ambassador Harper. The Council perhaps has not fully appreciated the extent of human integration into our systems and operations. However, there remains concern about unrestricted human technological development. Your species has a documented history of weaponizing new discoveries. As does every species represented on the Council, John countered. The difference is that you've had longer to learn from your mistakes. We propose that all species be subject to the same safety protocols and oversight mechanisms when developing potentially dangerous technologies. Not human oversight or Vespid oversight or Meraxian oversight, but collective oversight applied equally to all. The breakthrough came on the 6th day of negotiations. Dreth, who had been the most vocal opponent of human demands, received an urgent communication from his homeworld. When he returned to the chamber, his demeanor had noticeably shifted. It appears, he announced reluctantly, that the Meraxian Central Agricultural Authority has been unable to maintain production levels using the human techniques. Our agronomists report a projected shortfall of 60% for the coming cycle. My government requests that we expedite these negotiations to ensure the return of human agricultural experts. Zexatrol's antennae twitched in what John had learned to recognize as resignation. Similar reports have arrived from Vespid colonies and numerous other council worlds. The situation has become untenable. Ambassador Harper, the Council is prepared to consider your proposal for a new framework of relations. What followed was an intensive drafting process, with Frank Bennett working alongside the Council's legal representatives to craft the Cooperation and Development Treaty. The document established a fundamentally new relationship between humanity and the Galactic Council. First, humans would receive full voting membership in the Council, with representation proportional to population, just like all other member species. Second, all species-based technology restrictions would be abolished, replaced by a universal review system for potentially dangerous developments, applicable to all Council members equally. Third, territorial expansion rights would be granted, based on a species' demonstrated ability to responsibly develop and administer new regions, with humanity immediately receiving authorization to settle 12 previously restricted star systems. Fourth, defense responsibilities would be shared equally, with human military forces integrated into Council operations as full partners rather than auxiliary support. Fifth, all Council institutions and facilities would establish training and knowledge-sharing programs to ensure that critical systems could be maintained by diverse species, preventing dangerous dependencies. As the final draft took shape, John met privately with Zexatrol aboard the human diplomatic vessel. Away from the formal negotiation chamber, the conversation took on a more personal tone. "You have achieved a remarkable victory," Ambassador Zexatrol observed his translator, conveying a tone of grudging respect. "In less than a month, you have fundamentally restructured a relationship that has stood for over a century." John poured 2 glasses of a rare earth whiskey, offering one to the Vespid. "It isn't a victory, High Counselor. It's a correction. The old arrangement was unsustainable. Sooner or later, it would have collapsed. Better a controlled restructuring than a chaotic breakdown." Zexatrol's compound eyes studied the amber liquid in his glass. Human biochemistry research had long ago developed safe versions of Earth consumables for most Council species. "Perhaps. But I wonder if you realize what you have truly accomplished here. For 12,000 cycles, the Council has operated on the principle of gradual integration. New species join as junior partners, slowly earning increased privileges over millennia. You have shattered that paradigm in a single diplomatic stroke." "Times change," John replied simply. The galaxy is facing challenges that the old system wasn't designed to address. The scourge is just one symptom of a larger problem: growing instability along the border's resource pressures in the core systems, emerging threats from beyond explored space. We'll need every species contributing at their full potential to navigate what's coming. A surprisingly strategic perspective, Zexatrol commented. I had assumed your actions were motivated primarily by pride. John smiled faintly. Pride played its part, but humanity has always taken the long view. This new arrangement isn't just better for humans, it's better for the Council as a whole. You'll see that in time. 3 days later, in a formal ceremony, at the Great Library of the Galactic Council, the Cooperation and Development Treaty was signed. John Harper and High Counselor Zexatrol applied their signatures or equivalent marks to the document, witnessed by representatives from over 200 Council member species, and transmitted live to billions of beings across the galaxy. Today marks the beginning of a new era in the relationship between humanity and the galactic community, John declared in his address. Not as senior and junior partners, not as teachers and students, but as equals committed to mutual prosperity and shared responsibility. The stars belong to all sentient life, and the challenges we face can only be overcome through true cooperation. Zexatrol followed with his own remarks, the Vespid's formal diplomatic language, unable to completely mask the reluctant nature of the Council's concessions. The Council welcomes this new phase of our relationship with humanity. Through shared wisdom and collective effort, we will continue to guide the orderly development of galactic civilization. As the ceremony concluded, the massive withdrawal operation that had been proceeding across Council space for nearly 3 weeks began to reverse. Human engineers returned to Nexus Station, immediately implementing repairs to the failing environmental systems. Agricultural teams deployed to New Harvest to prepare for an emergency planting cycle. Military vessels rejoined defensive patrols along Horizon's edge, driving back the emboldened Scourge forces. The transition was not without complications. Some Council species resented the humans' new status, viewing it as preferential treatment. Others worried about the precedent it set for other junior species, who might now demand similar recognition. But the practical benefits of the new arrangement quickly became apparent as critical systems stabilized and normal operations resumed. 6 weeks after the signing of the treaty, John Harper stood at the observation deck of Nexus Station, gazing at the vast swirl of the galaxy beyond. Diane Lewis joined him, offering a data tablet with the latest reports. Environmental systems operating at 94% efficiency, she noted. Agricultural production on New Harvest already exceeding pre-withdrawal levels. And Scourge activity along Horizon's edge, down 62% since our patrols resumed. John nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. And the technology sharing initiatives? Proceeding better than expected. Dr. Patel reports that the Tellurian engineers are particularly quick studies. They've already mastered the environmental system modifications. And the joint human Meraxian agricultural research team has developed a new crop variant that shows promise for marginal worlds. And the territorial expansion? Diane smiled. The first colonial ships departed for the Aden system yesterday. Director Rodriguez estimates full settlement of all 12 new systems within 5 years. John turned from the viewport, his gaze taking in the bustling central promenade of the station. Humans moved freely among dozens of alien species, engaged in commerce discussion and collaboration. The subtle deference that had once characterized interactions between humans and Council species was noticeably absent, replaced by a more equal exchange. We took a tremendous risk, John said quietly. The Exodus could have failed. The Council could have chosen confrontation over negotiation. But they didn't, Diane pointed out. Because you understood something they'd forgotten: true cooperation can only exist between equals. Dependency masquerading as partnership is just another form of control. John watched as a human engineer explained a technical modification to a group of Proximan and Vespid technicians, the interaction marked by engaged questions and respectful attention on all sides. "The real work is just beginning," he observed. "Signing a treaty is easy compared to changing attitudes and relationships built over centuries. There will be resistance setbacks, maybe even attempts to reverse what we've accomplished. But the foundation has been laid," Diane said confidently. "Equality, mutual respect, shared responsibility. Those aren't just diplomatic phrases anymore. They're the practical reality of how the alliance will function going forward." As they turned to leave the observation deck, John's communication device signaled an incoming message. It was from Greg Walsh, who had remained on Earth to brief the planetary government on the treaty's implementation. "John, preliminary reports from Horizon's Edge confirm our suspicions," Greg's message stated. "Intelligence has identified Council military advisors working with the Scourge during our withdrawal. It appears certain factions were attempting to manufacture a crisis to force our return on their terms." John exchanged a knowing glance with Diane. "File the evidence, but take no action," he instructed. "It's leverage we may need someday, but for now, let's focus on making this new arrangement work." As they walked through the bustling corridors of Nexus, human and alien residents alike acknowledged the ambassador with newfound respect. Not the cautious deference of the past, but the genuine recognition accorded to an equal. It was a small change, but it symbolized the larger transformation taking place across Council space, a transformation that had begun with a bold decision and a simple phrase: "The Exodus begins now." In his private thoughts, John allowed himself a moment of pride. Humanity had gambled everything on their essential value to the galactic community, and won not just better terms, but genuine recognition. The old hierarchies were beginning to crumble, and in their place a more equitable order was taking shape, one that would allow all species to contribute according to their abilities and benefit according to their needs. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had proven itself not just a participant in that change, but a catalyst. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them not as supplicants or subordinates, but as full and equal partners in the great cooperative enterprise of galactic civilization. As the Nexus station continued its eternal orbit at the crossroads of a dozen trade routes, the legacy of the Exodus rippled outward, like a wave touching worlds and species far beyond humanity's reach. It wasn't just a diplomatic victory or a political realignment. It was the beginning of a new understanding of how diverse civilizations could coexist and collaborate in the vast theater of space. And it had all begun with a simple crystal data drive and the courage to walk away.